So today we have got a conversation with a young gentleman from the Eastern Cape, Mr. Mathabe Mlilo. He's the director of MapheQ Financial Solutions. And I caught up with him. We've got a very long history together. We've known each other for about 22 years. And I just really wanted to bring him on just in terms of entrepreneurship. He's run his own business for the last 7 years in a very competitive environment. He's got offices across South Africa. And I really wanted to get his take on what the situation is in terms of setting up a business, some entrepreneurship, mentorship, the importance of mentors in his life, as well as just some of the works that he's doing outside of business. So this is Mathabe Mlilo from MapheQ Financial Solutions. So as you know, I'm Andrew from NineLeaders, where we focus on developing the skills required for new and experienced leaders to take on the world 2021 and beyond. If this is the first time to the channel, don't forget to smash the subscribe button down below to keep up to date with all the new videos coming out and all the content. Mathabe Mlilo, welcome to NineLeaders. How are you, bud?
Good. How are you, Andrew?
No, very, very well, thank you. Listen, you're sounding a hell of a lot better than when we spoke a little while ago. You've been man down. Hey, you contacted the Rona. Good Lord. What happened?
And it's amazing when people tell you that your voice is the first thing that goes, you're like, can't be, until mine actually just went away. It was I think a typical sign that actually I've contracted this thing. And so I need to just make right, go test and all of that. It actually started with a scratchy throat.
Really?
And I thought it might've been the change of weather. I mean, change of season and whatnot. Because of course, the entire year, actually, I didn't have any flu, no symptoms, whatsoever. And so by the end of the year, we do what we call in our business year-end review. I'm sure you want to get to that.
Yeah.
But I was doing a lot of like traveling for my corporate year-end reviews, and so you get in a car sometimes, you're on a flight to Joburg, you're on a flight to Durban. And so I thought it might have been the traveling, and so you get in a car, you get out the car, do presentations, back in the car, and it's like, aircon, warm when you get out. And so I thought it's just, I guess inevitable that something is going to happen.
And body is probably run down as well, end of the year.
Yeah, so I was run down and I really did sort of feel tired. And I thought, let me actually, take some flu tablets that evening.
Yeah.
Some pharmacies around here, people are becoming creative. And so they're coming up with like concoctions that we can try out. I took this pack and I thought I should be fine by the following day, and I wasn't.
Oh.
And my throat was still feeling a bit scratchy, and I thought, you know what, at least let's eliminate one problem here. If it's corona, let's know, and then we can deal with that. If it's not, then take it from there. And so I tested positive. Fortunately, there's a place here that gives you the results immediately. And so I got the results. My wife was in the car, quickly got her to come in and test, and she tested negative. And that's the issue around this, that it's so unpredictable that you never know. I mean, it's not like we sleep in separate beds type of thing, Yeah. I started feeling the symptoms at least a couple of days before. And so it was amazing that she didn't pick it up, or rather she didn't have. And that's my story.
How long were you down for? Like 2 weeks? How long was it?
So I was down for about 2 weeks, more or less, and 10 days quarantine. I think it hits you emotionally. I mean, I didn't finish, my work, and I knew I was going to close. In fact, around just before Christmas, 24th, I had a lot to catch up on. Towards the end of November, I lost, one of my strong consultants, and I needed to pick up on her work. And so I had that, which I needed to postpone. And then I had Corona, because I was finishing up my year-end reviews. And then I had Corona, and I thought, you know what, I'll do the work, while I'm man down.
Yeah.
But I tell you, you can't think or function in that time. Some people react differently. Mine was just, it was hectic, but it didn't get to that, crucial stage, I guess, where chest closes up, shortness of breath, and all of that. I was fine, but I mean, you could feel it when you yawn. You know, your chest sort of closes in, but it wasn't anything that needed for me to actually go to hospital. But enough to actually just wear me out completely. You know, I mean, my laptop was just staring at me every single day. I'd open it up thinking I'll do some work, and I'd pass out. You know. So yeah,
that's hectic. Well, it's good to see you back on your feet, man, and you're looking well. I believe you hit the gym for the first time today in a little while.
Yeah,
so well
that's
done.
Right. Every now and then you must excuse me. I'm gonna be, you know, I've got like a little.
No, it's a glow. It's a glow. Well done. But listen, man, it's really good to see you. I think just a little bit of context about our relationship. We've known each other for probably about the last 22 years, I think. We obviously were at Queen's College together. We went to the same Bible college together a couple of years apart. Hailing from the same little town in Queenstown in the Eastern Cape. And I've followed your career for a long time. Obviously going through Standard Bank. So your work with Discovery.
Do you not have anything better to do than follow my career?
No, listen, I'm a stalker. Hey? Absolutely. I make sure when I always made sure that I got your signature at some stage, because I don't know when you're gonna like hit the hip hop stage and you're gonna flip and take your career in that sort of direction. So I thought I'd always just do that. But I really wanted to have you on the platform with regards to opening your own business. You've run your own business now for 7 years, or a little bit longer, in fact, and just to be able to give some insight into, from an entrepreneurial side of things, what some of your challenges have been, how successful you have been over the last 7 years, just a little bit around your background story, really to encourage our listeners around what they can do in terms of not only financial planning, obviously what your speciality is, but also just in terms of the work that you've put in to get this up and running, the different aspects of your life that you take into consideration. And it's not all just work. I do follow your Instagram. I do see you cooking sometimes. So it really is it's an all-rounder. So I really wanted to have you on the platform and just have a good old discussion. We won't have any beers or whiskey at the moment, but maybe we'll save that for the second time. Take us through your story. How on earth did you start? And I often get this question as well, that you're coming from the Eastern Cape, a small little town, and you've hit it big. You've done some amazing work. What's your story? How did it all start for you?
Yeah. Well, Drew, I think talking about Queenstown and our growing up, you know, I mean, you'd know that. I think I've shared this, you know, with a lot of people that whilst I attended Queen's College, you know, my journey through Queen's College wasn't an easy one from a financial point of view.
Yeah.
My mother was a single parent. I have 3 siblings, and so I can't tell you how many times I was kicked out of school, you know, because my mom couldn't afford the school fees.
Yeah.
And so in that time, I think there were little sort of angels that would come my way, people and events that you couldn't you couldn't sort of miss, and you had to take time and introspect in terms of what motivation you know, do they have to actually assist me? Because I mean, I remember, just to share one story, my mom's friend actually walked in at the house the one day. I was kicked out of school, and she said, "Look, what are you doing here at this time?" So I said, "Yeah, I was kicked out because your mom didn't pay school fees." And she said, "No, man, nonsense. You know, put your school uniform on and let's go." She gets to the bursar's office and pays everything, and for a couple of months going as well. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you look at those stories and you wonder, like, what motivation, you know, what pushes her to actually do what she has done. And I guess, and she was a business lady as well, you know, and had a boutique, a fashion boutique, you know, shop in Queenstown, and had a heart, you know, for people, I guess, and had a heart for seeing things change, you know, and so, and that, I think, to me, you know, sort of stayed at the back of my mind, I guess, you know, that in every endeavor, in whatever I did, the giving back element as a business owner, or as an individual, or even as a father, and whatever you see yourself as, is so crucial and so important, you know. And I think truly, and you've mentioned, you know, our Bible study days, you know, whatsoever a man sows, that he will reap, right?
Yep.
And that has never left me as well, and I think the biggest scripture that I took for my life that kind of like propelled me to the next level was, I would have lost hope unless I had believed that God can do, mighty works, or that God can move in the land of the living.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that the biggest part in that line is that I would have lost hope unless I had believed. And that's the belief that I needed to have every single time, that God can. And that importantly, I can as well. And so whatever challenges I'd faced, those three things, I always kind of made sure that they stay in my mind, that God can and that I can. And I have to believe, you know what I mean, that things will get better. And so the story then goes back to post my matric. I did our Bible year of your life, the Bible school. And after that, I mean, I've always kind of watched you guys, and I've watched every other team that came before me, and saw that there's always this one black sheep. You know what I mean? That doesn't make it for whatever reason. You know what I mean? And it's like, what happened to you? You know what I mean? Like everybody else is like doing exceptionally well. Yeah. So I've analyzed those stories, and I've always looked, you know what I mean, ahead, and I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. But the funniest thing is that I became that guy. I became, throughout the rest of my group, that black sheep that couldn't actually get to the next level. Okay. So Zooks and everyone else got accepted at varsity and went out to study, and I couldn't. And the reason I couldn't is because I wanted to do sound engineering, funny enough. And so the place or the institution in Cape Town, that I wanted to go to was a private institution. And so banks couldn't offer bursaries or loans, to those private institutions because they're not South African and so forth. So we went through great lengths, in ensuring that I actually get in, and I got accepted, but I couldn't actually pay the school fees, the fees. Yeah. And so because of my determination, I said, I'm not going to allow this to sort of decide for me what my life is going to be like. So I may seem like that black sheep, And so I printed about 30 CVs, and I started at the top of Cathcart Road, the main road in Queenstown. Yeah. And I distributed these CVs, and I said, if it means me raising funds to get to what I need to do, of course, my mom on the side is like, why don't you just find something else? We can do like, what is this thing? The bursary system for students at university. Is it TEFSA? I think it's TEFSA. We could do those things. I mean, your brother went and studied, at Border Tech and did his marketing diploma. I didn't have to pay anything, so you could do that. So I said, Mom, I'm determined to actually do this. And so that's what, is going to happen. Anyway, fast forward, Rion Cotjoy, a manager at Where's Cash and Carry, gets a hold of this CV, and he calls me in and gives me the work, and I tell him my story and what I need to do. So he starts saving my wages. So he would put aside my wages, at least about 2/3 of it, and give me 1/3 to take home. I was staying at home at that time. Yeah. There's another lesson, you know what I mean, from a savings and investment point of view, but just informal, I guess. And he does this thing for about 2 months. 2 months later, I get a call from Mr. Gilbert, our old
guidance counselor
student
teacher,
for guidance. Yeah. He calls me and he says, are you still looking for work? But guess what? He calls me at Where's Cash and Carry. So how he knows I'm working there to this day for me is still mind-boggling. I don't know how he got hold of my number, but whatever research he did, he was determined to get hold of me. Do you get where I'm heading at? Like, I think they say, I mean, it's easy for a man to rise to greatness when greatness is expected of him. You know what I mean? And so whatever research he had done, he was determined that this is a guy for it. So anyway, he's calling in to say, Mr. Howe at Standard Bank, manager at Standard Bank, is looking for old Queenians to, start off at a bottom level as a teller and all of that. And that's how I got in at Standard Bank.
That's amazing. Can I give you the other side of that story? I didn't know that, but I know this side of the story. I know how Mr. Gilbert actually got in touch with you. I was
Yeah.
talking with James Hustler. James was
Yeah.
talking at Queen's at the time, and
Yeah.
Gilbert phoned him on his phone while the two of us were driving through town. And he said, listen, he's just got this call from Standard Bank. Do we know, is Mathabe still in the market for a position? And James said, absolutely. So that's how that got through. So obviously, how from Standard Bank got hold of Mr. Gilbert, and then with Mr. Gilbert and James Hustler's relationship got through that way. So listen, it's like you said, things happen for a reason. Opportunity.
Absolutely. Never been able to connect the dots until now. That story for me is like, it's still part of an amazing, you know, how can I put it? Amazing, I guess, statement that says, if it's yours, it's yours.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it doesn't matter how it gets to you, it will get to you. And ours is certainly just to you know, my mentor used to say, just keep doing the right things, and eventually the right things will come to you.
Yeah.
Right. And ours is certainly that, just to put our head down and, you know, and buckle up, and, you know what I mean? And keep doing the right things, and eventually the right things will come to us, because whatever a man sows, you know, that he will reap. Right. And so anyway, I get this job, and they offer an opportunity to study. And whilst I was determined to do sound engineering, my mind, and I guess this is what we you know, some people that perhaps don't believe will say intuition, the gut feel, and those that do believe would say that it's that still small voice, right, that speaks to you, and it tells you that now the course of life is changing, and it's changing towards this side. And for me, I've always understood music to be a business. And perhaps I'm given an opportunity now to start to study business first before I get into the musical element, which is my passion.
Yeah.
Right. And so let me put my time to it now and actually find something that I can study, which will become a business, you know, degree or diploma, whatever the case may be. And so I studied, you know, I enrolled for marketing, and Standard Bank pays for this thing, and we push, you know, in the course of it. And things happen, of course, during Standard Bank. I mean, at some point I was selected to be part of what they call the New Generation Leadership Program, where they chose 50 people in the country. In the Eastern Cape, there were 6 people, and I was one of the 6. And as a teller, you know what I mean, moving into a customer information consultant role, mixed up with guys that were doing, that were business heads, you know what I mean, provincial business heads, provincial managers, you know what I mean? And here I am, this like Mathabe, who is in this company of, you know, like massive titles, if you want to call it that. And I had no title, possibly the only person that wasn't a manager. And I read so much into that. And instead of it intimidating me, I actually used that to propel myself to the next level. And to actually realize that there's potential in me. And there's a reason why these people have picked me. And so I need to dig deep and find it. You know what I mean? And it's almost like that they say potential is almost like we all have potential.
Yeah.
But it always needs that extra nudge or a push, right? To make it like, you know, like to ensure that it's actually exposed in you.
Yeah.
So anyway, but the drive though has to come from you, and the belief that, you know, you do have has to come from you. And the understanding that I don't know it all, and this is probably part of the reason why I'm here. And so anyone that tells me anything, I have to take nuggets of what is good and use those to build myself and take myself to the next level. And that's what, you know, my journey was like. In fact, every conversation that I always have, I use it as an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to learn something from somebody. And so I always think that there's a nugget, you know, that comes out of all of us that is designed or you know, prepared for you. And so you need to, you know, use that and ensure that it actually takes you to the next level.
So when was that? That was what, early 2000s?
That was 2002, 2002 when I got in at Standard Bank. 2003 was the New Generation Leadership Program. And so what they did, and it was a mentorship program that Standard Bank designed to ensure that information, because their understanding is that if you're looking at a pyramid structure, any information that comes from the top, when it's filtered down, it's already distorted. So the information gets to the bottom level, you know what I mean? Not the same as what they had intended as the business leaders and so forth. So they wanted to create a system that will bypass all of that and actually get information directly from, you know what I mean, the business leaders, whilst developing people and mentoring people and so forth, you know? So my mentor, and each of us were assigned mentors. My mentor was Helena Dolny. She's the ex-CEO of Land Bank, and she was, married to Joe Slovo.
Yep.
Helena used to, I was moved to PE at the time so that I could be closer to the provincial, office. And so as part of my development, so I got in at PE. Helena used to actually fly from Joburg to PE. We would literally sit at a restaurant for breakfast, lunch, and have some tea, you know what I mean, just before dinner, sitting in that, in that space and just conversing, her just imparting knowledge on me and just helping me grow. And those are things that's another point, I wanted to raise, that our journeys, we can never walk or be on our journeys because we are so brilliant. You know what I mean? It takes a village to raise a child, kind of thing. But importantly, mentorship has been something that I've recognized even from as early as that it's an important and an integral part of my success and my, development. And so I needed to always draw and find those individuals, whether socially, there's a person I know that I look up to, and we have chats. And from a business point of view, I have a mentor. Religion, you know what I mean? From a faith point of view, there is a mentor and somebody that I can bounce ideas off. And those people have helped shape, what you guys regard as success in my life. But I would say, they've given me perspective, you know what I mean? Where in any direction and you'd mentioned something about being well balanced, you know what I mean? And that's been the issue. It's because I had put a focus in ensuring that there is somebody that assists me, in every sphere or in every aspect of my life. And then, Standard Bank, I think while I'm grateful and had seen potential and knew that, they have a plan for me, the banks have a tendency to sort of keep you and I mean, with their bureaucracy and all of that, they whilst there is a development plan, those plans never materialize unless, somebody at the top dies or they move or whatever. So you're always depending on something in order for you to actually reach the next
regardless
level.
of what your performance is or anything like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what I mean? Because everything sort of works in that tier
Hierarchy,
system, hierarchy and so on, right? And so Liberty then comes along during that process. They hear about me and they call me and listen, we've heard this and that about you and we'd like to actually just have a chat. And so I was open to it. And I remember bouncing this idea, off Helena and saying, listen, I'm getting a job offer. Things are looking great here at Standard Bank. What do I do? One thing Helena said, which I'll never forget, was if Standard Bank was faced with the same decision about you, whether to keep you or to let you go, they'll always do what's best for the bank. So in that space, you have to do what's best for Mathabe.
Yeah.
But if you think taking the job at Liberty is the best thing for you, then do it. Don't worry about the plans that they have in place for you and whatever the case may be. Not that you're ungrateful or anything, but it's just you have to get into a space or a position where you do what is best for you. And again, what's important, and I've learned in that time, because years later, when I go back to Standard Bank and I introduce myself as Matt, and they'll be like, oh, is this the Matt? And you'd be like, what do you mean? Like, no, we've heard a lot about you and the things that you did, in the bank and this and that, the potential that you had and the plans that the bank had for you, and you sort of let all of that go. I said, no, I didn't let it go. Yeah. I chose. And here's the thing. You must make a decision based on the information that is available to you at that particular point. And when something like that, a story happens like that, you must be satisfied and content, that you made the best decision given the information that you had at the time.
Yeah.
It makes me sleep at night. But, it helps me sleep at night without having any regrets, you know what I mean? Whether that decision was good or not. I did what was best for me, given the information I had at that time. And I've never looked back,
And that's pretty much then gone into, from your time with Liberty, and that pretty much set you up, obviously gave you the groundwork, the understanding of the industry, the business, to be able to then launch into your own project. Which that was, you mentioned before you got chatting, you had the idea in around 2008 and you officially launched it in 2014, am I right? So there was still that incubation period that took place. Talk us through the decision-making process of going on your own, stepping out of that. Even though you stepped out of Standard Bank, you went into Liberty, you went into Discovery, they're still very large institutions. What gave you the balls to go, I'm going on my own? Because I've gone through that on my own, and it's one of those 2 o'clock in the morning decisions that you wake up, have a dream, wake up, get in, and say, listen, this is it. So what sort of fast forwarded to that period where you went on your own?
So I look back and I realized that in all these institutions, I have done exceptionally well, without it being an arrogant, statement or a moment to sort of blow my own horn. But the reality of it is that Standard Bank was successful in terms of achievements and so on. Liberty, at some point, I was actually number 3 in the country in terms of top sales, at Liberty, at the age of 20, I think I was 23 at that time, 24, 23. But I was able to actually, I was earning through I'm 39 now, 24, 25. I was earning about 60,000 net, for my age. I was like, gee,
you're balling,
of course,
baby.
you go through stages where you're like, I don't know what to do with this money. I don't know what to do, So I traveled the world and I've done, so you realize that there's only so much of this there's only so much you can achieve in terms of, targets being set up for you and you hit them. Discovery was the same. In the 3 years I was with Discovery, all 3 years I was a top consultant. And what gave me comfort was that I can keep doing this and I can earn the monies that I'm earning from these institutions. But every year, the reality is that you start off on a zero base.
Yeah.
And what you had put in the previous year is forgotten.
You're only as good as your last month's transfer.
You're only as good as your last. Absolutely, And what made me actually take the leap of faith was that the beauty about what I did with all the institutions now can become mine. And I don't have to start this year at a zero base.
Yeah.
But I keep building and I have the potential to do it, right? Because it's shown, in all these other places that I've been at. And so let's do it.
That's awesome.
And that's how it started. And so, of course, in our industry, you need to have the qualification for it in order to start your own. You need to have shown that you've worked, under a brokerage or a broker for at least, a period of minimum a year.
Yeah.
And in that year that you've held a leadership or a managerial sort of role, and so on. So there are all those requirements. So I couldn't actually just get out and start my business. I needed to work under somebody. And so I joined 2 institutions. The first one, I was with them for a year and a half. And the second one, I was with them for about 2 years before, leading into 2014. But in that time where I started my own application for my license, these guys were actually assisting me, and to share a story out of those 2, I always say that the first company actually taught me how to sell. The second company taught me how to run a business. Coincidentally, the second company, the guy that I met, John Armstrong, became my mentor, and somebody who I still to this day call up and say, John, how do I do this? What do I do in this and that and that? But what they did for me I could never put to words. You know what I mean? I can't explain the help that John and just the mentorship, once again, you know, that John showed, to a point where when I asked him, John, how do I repay you, when I was leaving and starting up my own, John said, pay it forward. Find somebody like you one day and help them grow, just like we did.
Awesome.
And can you see how all of these connections to mentorship and all of these connections to, which is why I gave you that first story about somebody giving in my life.
Yeah.
You know, I'm now being placed in a position where I can do the same. And I'm being told to actually make it, you know, a conscious thing in my life to find somebody to give back to.
Yeah.
Because people have given back to me. And,
so, I mean,
and that's been, yep.
Sorry, again, just the recurring theme here for me is there's always a potential for opportunity. It's how you anticipate that opportunity, how you grab that opportunity, the hard work that you put into that opportunity, as well as then the importance of that mentor program, or that mentor sort of mindset of aligning yourself with somebody that's gone before, that can challenge you, that can lead the way, not necessarily be the manager or anything like that, but be that person that sits on the sidelines, that gives you a bit of an overview of the entire game, that has been there before and has done that.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's 7 years now with MapheQ. How do you pronounce it? I asked you earlier. MapheQ. There we go. It's really exciting. And you've got offices in Durban, you've got offices in East London. From an Eastern Cape side of things, you obviously left the Eastern Cape for a while. You moved to Durban. You made a decision to move back to the Eastern Cape. In your mind, what is the sort of the thinking around moving back to the Eastern Cape? We know from a provincial side of things, the economy, Eastern Cape, it ranks in the highest unemployment, the highest levels of poverty, and things like that. And was that part of your thought process of going, well, giving back? How do I translate that, using my business to be able to give back? And we've spoken previously around from an education side of things, being able to educate, not only manage your clients' finances, but actually increase that knowledge around wealth management. Was that part of the thinking when you moved back to the Eastern Cape?
I would say, I mean, yes and no. I think the biggest driving force for me was that I knew that I had the biggest relationships built up in the Eastern Cape. I was born here. So, you know, when we had set up the business in Durban, because that's where we started. So our head office was in Durban. I used to come down to East London and spend about a week or so. And over time, I started realizing that the business I was getting in the Eastern Cape in a week was probably more than the 3 weeks that I spent in Durban.
That's fascinating.
You know, fascinating. And so I started analyzing it as well and looking at why that is the case. So first, it was the relationships, you know, and second, it was also the potential that exists within East London possibly being the most central to PE, Queenstown, Tata, and so on. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, whilst my wife and I probably would have loved to settle in PE based on the fact that it's beautiful, it's this and that, but from a business point of view, we knew that East London is the hub and it's a center, or it's central to all of these places that I've just mentioned. But it also made me realize that, you know, if you do your research, you'll find that East London actually has the most millionaires per capita.
I heard that.
And so
that blew my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and so it tells you that there's potential for more business, actually. You know what I mean? And so what I'm looking for is there.
Yeah.
But I also realize that some of it is actually informal. And it's not through the system. And so if you look at tenderpreneurs as an example, you know, very informal in their approach. They don't have systems that are set up, you know what I mean? And perhaps what they declare, you know, is not necessarily what they are receiving. So you see it, they're flashy cars. And I mean, you go to any estate agent, you know, they'll tell you that guys come in there and they buy houses cash.
Yeah, bags of cash.
You go to, absolutely. And you go to, you know, one of these car places. And again, car sales, people will tell you that guys come in there and they buy their cars cash. Why is that? You know what I mean? Was my question. And it was based on the fact that there's money floating, one in the system, which is the formal aspect of what you always want from a growing the economy point of view. You know what I mean? Because the economy grows when unemployment obviously reduces, and you're seeing more sort of inflows, of funds. And then there's the informal side of it, a farmer who produces and sells to hawkers. They can't put that in the system, that they sold this thing through to these guys. And so in the form of getting receipts. So there is business, but most of that business is perhaps informal.
Yeah.
And that's what you also want to capitalize on.
And I think that's living in Gauteng, you see the news, you see all of these things. Does that put you in a positive state of going, well, Eastern Cape is it's a really good place to be. It's just that the facts and figures, the data isn't necessarily showing up what is actually on the ground, actually happening there.
Absolutely.
Is it a true reflection?
And I think for any leader or business owner, you want to spend some time. I mean, research on the online is good, but actually the experience of being, in a place is probably of utmost importance as well. You're seeing this picture when you go to the airport in East London. The airport in East London, go there on a Monday, go there on a Friday. Yeah. The busiest. You have Joburgers sort of coming in, flying in, going to do business in Mthatha and all of those places, because they understand that people there are not necessarily going to reflect on the data that you will find, on the net. Yeah. But they have a system that cash is king. And so they have the cash. And if they want to build anything as a builder or as whatever, you know what I mean? What's important to me is that I get my money and I'm able to do or render the services, So those are things that you realize that there's so much activity, and the economy around East London actually, I mean, is thriving as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you look at the cost, your housing costs, in East London versus in PE. It's because of the demand that you're seeing in East London versus, PE, that the prices are so high. In East London versus PE. So those things, I mean, are things that I've sort of played around in my mind and kind of have helped sort of shape that decision, saying we are moving back. That's awesome. We're moving back, but we don't want to lose what we've started in Durban, because we realize that it's value. I mean, to this day, I do, my own analysis to see the business coming in from Durban versus my overheads, still worlds apart. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we're able to actually survive and make a profit in Durban. And so there's no reason for us to close that office whilst we actually turned things around and made East London our head office, and Durban now just becoming
still contributing to the overall picture.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
You spoke a lot about giving.
What even made that worse was the merger that we I don't know if I ever told you about that. So we merged with a company, where they were doing short-term insurance. Okay. And so they were big on that. I mean, 20 years in the business, just focusing on short-term insurance. We started that department, I think, about 2 years before we met them. And it grew. And I saw, that the growth that we that came from it, to a point where I actually wanted to even, make it bigger. And so a merger with somebody that has the skill set and everything else, you know what I mean, that comes with it, was the only was the only plausible way to
outcome,
yeah.
So again, it's about that growth. It's around looking for opportunities, seeing where you can get experts involved, whether it's mentors or from a business side of things. You spoke previously about giving back. And one of the things that we chatted previously about was obviously our roots in Queenstown and with Queen's College. You are very involved with the Old Boys Association. QCOBA is probably one of the biggest Old Boys associations in the country. Just talk us through a little bit of that thinking. What's your involvement there, and what are sort of the plans that you've got with the Old Boys Association? Obviously, keep the school functioning as well as it has over the last 170, 180 odd years now, almost,
Yeah.
I'd say.
Yeah.
What's your involvement there?
So I now serve as a deputy managing director, on the National Council for Queen's College. And so what the National Council really does is that it looks after the QC Trust, which is, the engine that makes the money for the school.
Yep.
It looks after the Queen's College Old Boys Association, where you have its own president. And then it looks after, the school's governing body. And so the head of that, also reports to the National Council, and then the two headmasters from the primary school, as well as the high school, also reporting to the National Council. And so we have directors within the National Council. But my involvement with the National Council, started at grassroots, where I moved to East London. I realized that the association in East London wasn't active, and I felt it was actually, the guys were sleeping, because this is the closest city to our good old town, and so if youngsters don't have any direction like me, we use my example, or rather my situation as an example. Given a chance to move to East London, I would want to connect, with the association, my old brothers, from my alma mater. And so when I realized that it wasn't active, and there were a lot of these youngsters that were just falling through, through the cracks, and I would meet up with a lot of them, like, hey, how are you doing? Are you in East London? Yes. And I started this WhatsApp group just from those interactions, and we eventually connected with the previous guys that ran it, like your George van Eerdens and so forth.
Yeah.
And we were like, George, we've got to get this thing going again. And part of that reason for me was also looking at how my career was sort of, kick-started by an old Queenian.
Yeah.
And by the networks that we create as a group of Queenians, kind of thing. And so what would be amazing is actually, whilst we network and reminisce about, the good old days, there's an opportunity for somebody in there that could be created for business, or even from a youngster, looking for work, and we employ from within. You know what I mean? So I thought, we have to get this thing going. We have to encourage, this interaction. My first job came from a Queenian. And who knows, somebody else's first job could be, as a result of this network that we're creating. So the thing grew to eventually, I then sort of became the chairman of the East London branch. And the first year when we got it going, I actually refused, to head it up, because I knew that I was still setting up my business. And so I wasn't going to have the time to actually focus on it. And so Kaka became the first chairman, post my moving to East London. And the year after that, of course, I was his deputy. And then the year after that, I then led. And then from there, positions then started becoming, available in the National Council. Names needed to be thrown based on the work that we were doing. And so that's how I ended up in the National Council, and which was great, because what I've always sort of sensed was that, Queen's College now, the demographics are changing and sort of skewed towards, probably I'd say 80%, 90% Black as the school, the pupils attending Queen's, but I would safely say, but supported 100% by white old boys and white families, that still have some attachments and connections to Queen's College.
Yeah.
And it's only a matter of time that you start seeing that, sort of the support sort of moving away, because now, without making it a race,
lost. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But
there's absolutely no benefit other than the legacy that's still, the traditions that are attached, but we might lose the traditions if, there's no support, and all of those things. So we need it as Black old boys to get into the system, to be able to not only, be the voice for change to some of the traditions that are not necessarily, suitable for the demographics that are Queen's College right now. And so that's the motivation in me getting in there. But I think it also helped from a business point of view for us to actually find youngsters that we can actually mentor and put to university. And so that's what we do as well as a business, you know what I mean? So we make those contributions. So I was saying, I mean, if I were to summarize anything, I think what's important for any young entrepreneur, you know, it's to formalize our businesses. And I say that with much respect, you know, and also with the thinking that we never grew up, you know, being taught by our parents how to run a business. And so most of the things that we understand about business have been informal, or I would have gone to university and study, you know what I mean? But not for us, by those closer to us. And therefore, you know, we have this passion to run businesses, but we don't understand the intricacies of business, that the passion is not business. Business is understanding HR, IT, understanding, you know, the sales element, marketing, understanding all, you know, all of those different facets or pillars of business, and mixing it up with the passion that you have, your skill set. But fundamentally, getting into a position where we start creating healthy organizations. A healthy organization is one that, you know, that not only focuses on those things, but the people that make the business. You know what I mean? And ensuring that those people are developed, that we grow them. And the only way we can do that is if we formalize our businesses, and compliance being the most important thing. I look at, you know, the COVID fund, the relief funds that were given out to most businesses. You know, 75% of the businesses that got funding were white-owned businesses. And the reason for that, I mean, again, without making it a racial thing, is because Black-owned businesses were not compliant. And so that's why they didn't qualify, you know what I mean, to get the funding. So I think if there's anything to take out of this conversation is that whilst you have this passion, and whilst you're driven to actually start up your own thing, make sure that you understand and link yourself up with the right mentors who can actually point you in the right direction so that you can formalize your business and think about legacy, you know what I mean, before, you know, this hand to mouth kind of thing, the millions that these guys are making and how quickly they disappear and gone with the wind as if nothing had ever, you know, existed. We've got to get out of that, you know, mentality and start building businesses that will be there for years to come and for generations to come.
That's awesome. That's well played. I think obviously, and we'll talk about, I'll put the links below for the QC Trust. If anybody wants to contribute or anything like that, we can definitely hook that up. But Matt, listen, it's been great catching up with you again. It's so good. And I think going into the chat, I was thinking back 22 years of us in Queenstown, and now looking 22 years later, looking at what you've done, it's been absolutely phenomenal. So congratulations, well done. We're definitely going to have to catch up sometime when either I'm down in the Eastern Cape or alternatively you up here at Joburg. But again, thanks so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure, and all the best for 2021. Go out and smash it. All right.